Clara Barnes stepped into the cafe on a crisp autumn morning, tugging her coat tight around her shoulders. The sign above the entry read La Tazza, adorned with a painted cappuccino cup swirling with steam. She had arrived in town the night before, exhausted after a delayed flight and a marathon of client meetings. Outside, long shadows lay across the sidewalk, and the cool breeze hinted at shorter days to come. Inside, though, the cafe glowed with a soft warmth, subdued lamplight shimmering across polished wooden floors, the aroma of freshly ground beans curling through the air. As she inhaled the comforting scent, she felt a distinct pull to linger, as though the place whispered, "Stay a while." Jazz chords carried through the space, so light that Clara at first thought it was recorded background music. She followed the gentle notes past a cluster of mismatched tables toward the back of the cafe. There, seated at a small upright piano, was a man in a dark button down shirt with rolled up sleeves, his hair falling in soft waves across his forehead. His long fingers glided deftly across the worn ivory keys, shaping phrases that somehow wove seamlessly with the patter of conversation around them. Clara found herself unconsciously slowing, wanting to observe him before stepping up to the counter. She noticed how he lifted his eyes intermittently from the keys to take in the ambiance, Matumers leaning heads together, steam rising from paper cups, pastries perched on delicate plates. There was a tenderness to his expression, as though he were playing not for an audience, but for the space itself, letting its energy guide his music. Perhaps he was leading them all in a secret dance of sorts, a gentle morning ballet. By the time she joined the line for coffee, Clara already felt profoundly drawn to the music and to its mysterious maker. Once she'd ordered her latte, Clara settled into a worn brown armchair, angled so she could catch glimpses of the pianist's face while sipping. She'd already braced herself for a day of contract negotiations and presentations, but something about the softness of this morning performance stilled her usual hurry. She let herself savor the moment, the gentle hum of the espresso machine, the hush of pages flipping in newspapers, and these tender melodies raining down like blessings upon the cafe's patrons. When the pianist paused, he looked up and met Clara's gaze. His eyes were bright, as if they caught the first glint of morning light. He dipped his head once in a greeting before returning his attention to the piano keys. A sudden warmth colored Clara's cheeks, and she resisted an impulse to lower her gaze. Instead, she raised her latte in a light-hearted salute, which drew a thin smile from him. Those simple gestures felt like a shared secret, more personal and intimate than most of the business dinners she'd endured in silent hotel bars. In that instant, the clang of a spatula in the kitchen and the hiss of the milk frother seemed to disappear, and only the hush of music remained. She wanted to hear more, to know the story hidden behind each chord, but the cello of duty beckoned. There were emails to answer, phone calls to make. With one last admiring glance, she stood, straightened her blazer, and walked out the door, the day waiting to swallow her into its demanding tide. Despite a hectic schedule, Clara found herself drawn back the very next morning. Her internal monologue insisted she was only at La Tazza because it served the best espresso in town, an essential prelude to another series of challenging meetings. Yet, as soon as she stepped inside and heard the first tinkle of piano notes, she could no longer deny there was more at play. The same pianist was there, wearing much the same clothes, his sleeves rolled just as high above his wrists. But today, the tune was more playful, imbued with an undercurrent of curiosity that danced in the spaces between notes. Clara ordered her latte and a croissant. She approached a table closer to the piano, setting her laptop bag at her feet. With each bite of flaky pastry, she felt the pianist's music ripple through her senses, uplifting her as though the cafe air were charged with a secret electricity. A sense of belonging washed over her, reinforcing that she wasn't just passing time in a strange city. She was on the brink of discovering something remarkable. She caught his eye again the moment her heart felt especially moved by a particular turn of chords, a delicate lift of his eyebrows, a smile that skirted the corners of his mouth, and for an instant she sensed he played that progression just for her. Emboldened by a flutter deep in her stomach, she mouthed, "Beautiful," as soon as he paused. If he saw, he gave no sign, only resumed with a lyrical phrase that seemed to answer her unspoken compliment. Exquisite harmonies wrapped themselves around the steaming mugs and quiet chatter so intimately that Clara almost overlooked her phone, which buzzed with an urgent message from a colleague. Coming reluctantly, she made her exit once again, tethered by responsibilities yet longing to stay wrapped in that morning rhapsody. Over the next few days, a pattern emerged. No matter how short her stay in a city, Clara typically found one favorite cafe to frequent, a comfortable nook to ground her between flights and hotel rooms. Yet none had drawn her quite like Lattes did. Each morning she arrived earlier, choosing a table with a clear view of the piano. She lingered longer, occasionally exchanging small smiles or nods with the pianist. Sometimes, during a particularly enchanting passage, she would close her eyes to let the notes settle in her heart. And each time she wondered about the man's name, how he came to grace this little oasis with music so profound it could alter the rhythm of her day. Her curiosity deepened when she discovered a sign on the counter inviting patrons to come for an open mic evening every Friday. The first time she saw it, she imagined the pianist in a more official setting, performing unabashedly under a spotlight, rather than just serenading the early morning coffee crowd. She felt a flutter of nerves or anticipation. She couldn't be sure. For a moment, she fantasized about staying in town long enough to attend, perhaps seated in a front row chair, giving the silent encouragement she always yearned to give. But her departure date was set. Work demanded she fly out the very next day. As she sat in the cafe that final morning, sipping a cappuccino to the resonance of hauntingly beautiful chords, she felt a pang of sadness. The fleeting connection she had with this stranger seemed as though it could vanish with the next flight. Impulsively, she vowed she would speak to him before leaving. She deserved at least to know his name. She waited until his set concluded. The pianist calmly placed the fallboard over the keys and stretched, stepping away from the bench. As he headed for the coat rack in a corner, Clara caught his eye and nodded a greeting. Gathering her courage, she approached him, the swirl of coffee scents and the hush of background noise spinning around them both. "Hi," she said, her voice carefully casual. "I've been coming here in the mornings. Your music, I love it. She surprised herself by the sincerity in her voice. "Thank you," he replied, setting his jacket over one arm. His voice was low and resonant, echoing the warmth of the piano. "I'm glad you enjoy it." "I'm Clara," she offered, extending her hand. Up close, she noticed the brown speckles in his otherwise hazel eyes and the faint calluses on his fingertips. He took her hand gently. "Victor," he answered, giving her a small, courteous smile. "Nice to meet you." She wanted to say more about how his music lifted her spirit, about how she felt a strange kinship whenever she entered the cafe, but a polite voice in her head counseled restraint. "I'm traveling for work and found my way here. I'm leaving town today, but I've really appreciated your playing." The corners of his eyes crinkled slightly. "Safe travels," he said. "If you come back, maybe you'll catch one of our open mic nights." Clara felt a ripple of something, possibility, maybe, flit across her skin. But there was no time to indulge in fantasies. She nodded, bid him goodbye, and left, the door chime softly marking her exit. Life as a traveling entrepreneur often blurred days into an ongoing marathon of deadlines, new faces, and hurried airport shuttles. Still, Clara found her mind wandering back to La Taza, the comforting hum of the espresso machine, the interplay of sunbeams and shadows across the floor, and, above all else, the memory of Victor's music. During long hours in hotel bars or chain coffee spots, the memory of that warm cafe with live piano gave her a peculiar sense of nostalgia. She wondered if Victor's gentle chords were still drifting through that space. offering solace to the busy or the broken who sought refuge there. In the weeks that followed, Clara's phone became a companion for more than just emails or social media. She found herself scrolling through music platforms, searching for jazz pieces that might match the style Victor played. At night, after draining the last of her lukewarm room service coffee, she would shut her laptop and let the tunes whisk her back to that serene morning. Sometimes she even pictured herself walking into La Taza and hearing Victor greet her with a personalized flourish. It was an odd dream, she admitted, especially for someone who liked to keep her personal life separate from business. But that cafe had felt undeniably special, and her memories of it continued to tug at her heart. When her next travel itinerary popped up on her screen, she gasped softly. A new client had requested an in person consult in the same town. She would have 2 full days there. Excitement mingled with a low current of fear. What if returning to the cafe felt different this time? Or if Victor hardly remembered her? Casting away those doubts, Clara decided she had to go. If anything, she owed herself the chance to slip back into that world, if only for a while. The sharp November wind nipped at Clara's cheeks as she walked through the streets once more. This time, the sidewalks glistened with a thin layer of frost, and early holiday lights twinkled in the storefronts. Feeling the gentle hum of anticipation rise inside her, she pushed open the door to La Tazza. Despite the early hour, the cafe was lively. She scanned for the piano, heart pulsing quickly. He was there, Victor cradling the same upright piano with chord progressions that seemed to beckon her forward. Something in his expression lit up when he noticed her, surprise and a faint smile of recognition. She ordered her latte, her heart fluttering with each step toward a table near him. As the song ended, Victor let his fingers drift off the keys before meeting her gaze. His unspoken question hung in the air. "You came back?" She nodded in response, her eyes bright. After the last note faded, was replaced by polite applause from a pair of older women sipping tea. Victor excused himself from the bench. This time he approached her, his stride expectant, reminiscent of those searching chords he had just played. "Welcome back," he said quietly. "I'm here for a meeting," she replied, "but I had to stop by. I've been missing this place." "I'm glad." His smile broadened. "I hoped you might show up again sometime." Their conversation felt like a tangible extension of his music, layered, emotive, with subtle shifts in tempo. Clara found herself describing the busy schedule she'd been keeping, the chorus of red-eye flights, conference rooms with stale air. In turn, Victor mentioned how La Tazza had become more than just a performance venue. It was his sanctuary, a place where he could explore the meandering paths of jazz without judgment. As they talked, the morning crowd buzzed around them, but Clara felt tucked within a bubble of shared fascination, so much so she completely lost track of time. That day after work, Clara found herself excitedly returning to the cafe with no real plan other than to see if Victor might still be there. To her delight, she discovered he was, practicing quietly in a lull before the early evening rush. She ordered a simple coffee and slid into a nearby seat, letting the velvety darkness of the brew settle into her as she listened. For a while, neither spoke. Clara watched the graceful economy of his fingers, glimpsed the concentration in his features. Each chord progression rose and fell like a whispered conversation, coaxing the stress from her shoulder. At last, when he paused briefly to rub his eyes, she approached the piano. "Do you ever let someone else sit here?" she teased, eyeing the empty space beside him on the piano bench. He chuckled, shifting over to make room. "If they ask nicely." Clara eased onto the bench, their shoulders almost touching. Up close, she could see faint pencil marks on the sheet music, reminders of how meticulously he shaped his interpretation. Impulsively, she pressed a few keys. The notes rang out, unrefined and slightly clumsy, yet Victor's face lit up, as though he heard a hidden melody in her hesitant strokes. She tried to replicate a simple scale from memory, but her pinky slipped slightly. Victor reached over, guiding her fingertip back to the correct sequence with gentle pressure. Heat spread from her hand to her cheeks, and for a fleeting moment she remembered every detail, from the flecks in his eyes to the faint aroma of coffee clinging to his skin. A soft hush enveloped them, and for that stretch of time, the outside world melted away. That evening, after the cafe closed, they found themselves walking down quiet streets illuminated by clusters of holiday lights. Wisps of fog caught the glow, refracting it into halos around lampposts. The city had a different character by night, shimmering with a subdued magic. They chatted quietly, the conversation weaving between their backgrounds, Clara's childhood in a small coastal town, Victor's early fascination with jazz records inherited from his grandfather, the aspirations they harbored but rarely spoke of to others. When the wind grew colder, they ducked into a dimly lit bistro for a round of mulled cider. Surrounded by rustic wooden tables and a scattering of patrons, they leaned closer to talk over the soft background music. Clara shared her struggles balancing a demanding career with the desire for a sense of home. In return, Victor confided that after years in a music conservatory, he had grown disillusioned with the pressure to be perfect, leading him to a more organic, improvisational approach at the piano. He recounted a period when he nearly quit playing altogether, feeling that the soul of music had been overshadowed by competitions and critiques. It was only after moving here and discovering Latazza's unpretentious platform that he felt free to rediscover the joy in every note. As they emptied their cups, an unspoken understanding blossomed. Each recognized a kindred spirit in the other, someone searching for solace and authenticity in the midst of big dreams and even bigger expectations. Outside, when they parted ways, Clara was keenly aware of an unaccustomed warmth surging through her. Work might have brought her here, but something more profound was keeping her in this city, at least for tonight. The next day, her meetings wrapped earlier than expected, leaving Clara with a bittersweet realization that she would soon have to leave town. Her schedule demanded she return to headquarters with multiple projects waiting for her attention. A swirl of emotions clouded her as she recalled the previous evening. Conversations, laughter, the faint brush of Victor's knee against hers as they leaned in to share stories. Somehow, in such a short time, they had forged a deep connection. Before the late afternoon flight, she made one last trip to La Tassa. Tea lights in frosted jars decorated the tables, creating little pools of golden glow in the afternoon dim. Victor spotted her and lifted his hand in greeting. He appeared to be packing up, placing sheet music into a battered leather satchel. "You off to the airport soon?" he asked gently, noticing the travel bag slung over her shoulder. She managed a small nod. "Yes, but I couldn't leave without coming here one final time." A flicker of disappointment flashed across his face, though he quickly masked it. "I'm glad you did." He took a breath, as though debating how much to say. "I'll be here for the Friday open mic." He paused, measuring her response. "I'm scheduled to perform a special set, something I've been working on. You mentioned you wanted to see one of those nights." Clara felt her heart constrict. She wanted to say she would be there, front and center, but reality tugged at her. Her job demanded she return now, and yet the desire to stay was overwhelming. "I'm flying out this afternoon," she said softly, "but maybe I can make arrangements. I can try to come back. It's not too far, not really." His slow, understanding nod didn't hide the glimmer of hope in his eyes. In that moment, Clara felt the buzzing of her phone in her coat pocket, but she ignored it. She placed her hand gently on his arm. "I want to see you play," she murmured. "I'd like to hear what you've been composing." Emboldened, Victor returned the gesture, his hand covering hers. "Then promise you'll try," he whispered. "I'll look for you in the crowd." Back in her office a few days later, Clara found it impossible to banish thoughts of Victor and his upcoming performance. Each time she opened her planner, she imagined scribbling out her obligations and jetting back to that cozy A sense of purpose blossomed within her. She would go, despite the challenges, and see where this swirling new connection led. Her rational mind insisted it might be foolishly impulsive, but her heart resounded with, "We have to try." So, on Friday morning, she rearranged her meetings. She found a last minute flight that would arrive just in time. Adrenaline pulsed as she navigated crowded airport terminals and a labyrinth of traffic to hail a taxi into town. She barely even paused to drop her luggage at the hotel, not wanting to miss a single beat of Victor's performance. When she arrived at Lattes, the scene was enchanting. The cafe glowed with strings of twinkling lights draped around the windows. Conversations hummed as local artists, amateur poets, and curious friends milled about. A small makeshift stage had been set up in front of the piano. Clara slipped into a seat near the front, her heart pounding at the sight of Victor adjusting a microphone stand, checking the keys. When he looked out over the crowd, his gaze found hers, and she lifted her hand in a discreet wave. A flicker of joy brightened his face. Victor's set started with a familiar jazz standard that lured the audience into a communal hush. His playing was as graceful as ever, but tonight it carried an added spark, a sense of urgency beneath the melody. Clara felt her breath catch at the shimmering tension in each chord, as though he were channeling an entire ocean of emotion into the notes. She noticed the rapt faces around her, an older man gently tapping his foot, a young couple with hands entwined, a group of students swaying in tandem. All seemed entranced, lulled by the warm, expressive bloom of his music. At the conclusion of that first piece, mild applause rippled around the room, scattered whoops dancing in the air. Victor thanked everyone for coming, voice unsteady with a hint of nerves. Then he introduced an original composition. "I wrote this recently," he said, glancing toward Clara. "It's called Unexpected Muse." Her heart raced. She could scarcely believe he was daring to name it so publicly. As the first four notes lifted from the piano, she felt a tremor of recognition. The chord progression was reminiscent of the earliest tunes he had played those mornings she'd sat in the cafe, now woven into a richer tapestry with subtle modulations. The piece rose, gathering momentum, then pulled back into moments of hushed intimacy, as if capturing the first uncertain steps of two strangers forging a bond. Clara sank into the melody, tears pricking at the corner of her eyes, the music calling forth every recent memory. Her initial glimpse of him at the piano, their shared smiles, his gentle guidance of her fingers across the keys, and the quiet conversation on a foggy night. By the time the last note waned to silence, the audience seemed to hold its breath in reverence. Then applause surged, carrying an extraordinary mix of awe and gratitude. Clara joined in wholeheartedly, feeling that even a standing ovation would be too meager for what he had just given them. Committing the shimmer of that moment to memory, she locked eyes with Victor. He gave a slight nod, as though to say, "Thank you for being here." In the intimate afterglow of his performance, Clara met Victor by the piano. People milled around them, offering accolades, but when they withdrew, Victor turned to her. In his expression, she saw relief and exhilaration, as if a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. She praised him with unrestrained delight, telling him how profoundly the music had moved her. "It's amazing, Victor," she said, barely above a whisper, "the way you captured the serendipity of everything. How life can surprise us just when we think we know what we're doing." He reached out and took both her hands in his, pressing them gently. "That's exactly it," he replied, voice trembling with the overflow of emotion. "I never expected any of this. You waltzed into the cafe like you were meant to be part of its rhythm. And now, I can't imagine these mornings without that sense of anticipation, looking up to see you, listening." Clara felt a pull, slow and certain, as though her heart was guiding her closer. As the hum of conversation receded, they stood together in the soft glow of fairy lights, that intangible hush shimmering between them. She leaned in, bridging the last inch of space and letting her lips brush his. The kiss felt to her like the moment a musical piece finally resolves a chord that had been lingering in suspense. When they stepped back, The cafe's warmth and the swirl of coffee-scented air seemed to enfold them with gentle acceptance. They walked outside into the crisp night, neither speaking for a time, content in each other's presence. Overhead, the whir of a distant airplane reminded Clara that she had once again altered her plans. Yet for the first time in a long while she felt unburdened, certain that this new path was worth following. Eventually they found a quieter side street, where holiday lights flickered softly underneath the evening sky. At each silent intersection they paused and exchanged smiles, letting that heady mixture of excitement and calm wash over them. Having spent so many years diligently adhering to business schedules, Clara relished a surge of relief at letting her heart's desire claim center stage. If there were consequences or complications, she would handle them. Right now, the hush of possibility, the spark of romance unfolding to the tune of a jazz piano, was enough. They ducked into a tiny late-night bakery that still glowed with welcome, sharing slices of spiced cake and sipping warm drinks. Time blurred in the comfort of each other's company. As they talked about music, dreams, and the countless unknowns ahead, Clara felt that they were painting a future with words, painting notes dancing on the edges of imagination. The city seemed to hush around them, as if granting permission for a personal world to flourish in this moment. Hours later, they exited hand in hand. A few snowflakes drifted lazily from a grayish sky, hinting at a gentle snowfall to come. The street glowed under the lamplights as though lit from within. Clara glanced at Victor, her cheeks warm, and understood that this connection, born of shared mornings, espresso steam, and jazz chords, had woven itself into her life more intricately than she would have ever thought possible. Whatever came next, they would navigate it together. The hush of the piano's final note still reverberated in her ears, mingling with the new symphony of two hearts, unexpectedly aligned. And Clara knew there was no turning back.